welcome into Texans today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and on today's show, we're breaking down DeMeco Ryans' comments at the NFL owners meeting and some draft visits, the latest ones to visit with your Houston Texans. Shout out to Sam Brown for fixing the light before I started filming this video. Now, before we get into DeMeco's comments, I just want to lay out everything that we're going to go over that he discussed at the NFL owners meeting. He talked about that report of the toxic offensive line, the toxic culture in the Texans locker room. He talked about Laremy Tunsil, the trade and the rationale behind it. He talked about the new offensive coaching staff, and he talked about the new free agent additions to this team this offseason. All of this we'll be breaking down on today's show. But since we're going to be talking a lot about DeMeco on today's show, I want to know, do you trust DeMeco Ryans? If you do trust DeMeco as the head coach of this team, go down and like the video. If not, go down and comment why. I want to see why people are apprehensive to put their trust in DeMeco Ryans. If you love DeMeco like I do, just go down and simply hit that thumbs up icon. If not, let me know why down in the comments section. Now, first up, and probably the reason why most of you clicked into today's video, the Albert Breer report around the Texans having a toxic culture in the locker room and especially around the Texans offensive line room this past season. DeMeco was asked about it, and this is exactly what he had to say. There was nothing toxic in the room. Those guys showed up to work every day and were a fighting group. I don't know where the report came from, but it was incorrect. There's nothing toxic in our building, and that's something I don't stand for as the head coach of the team. We bring in the right people. All those guys are great guys. DeMeco just straight up said, Albert Breer, you are a liar. He said all those reports were false, had no backing to it whatsoever. And some of the guys that I've talked to close to the team kind of shared that same sentiment, and that Albert Breer really didn't know what he was talking about when those reports came out. Now, I'm not here to say that Albert Breer was right or that he was wrong. I'm just laying out the facts of he had that report. DeMeco came out and he refuted it wholeheartedly. So I don't know. Who do you want to believe? I lean on the belief in DeMeco Ryans and this coaching staff, but he also had some interesting comments about this staff last year coming up in just a moment that you might want to stick around for. Next up, he talked about the Laremy Tunsil trade and how that kind of went about in this Texans front office and the rationale behind it. This is what he had to say on the Tunsil trade. When you put the tape on Sunday, he's arguably one of the best one-on-one pass protectors in the NFL. Laramy's been an integral part of our team, and he's been a captain for us for the past 2 years as well, so it's hard losing him for us. But being in the position we're in, we have to make those tough decisions and make those tough calls. We know we're making a move to make our team better. So a little bit of both right there. He gave some praise to Tunsil on the way out, saying, yeah, he's been a captain for us the past 2 years, one of the best pass blocking tackles in the NFL, which I've been saying for the past little bit that, Laremy Tunsil is a top 5 pass blocking tackle in the NFL. But I think this is very telling on where the Texans want to go from here, because he mentioned, oh yeah, he's one of the best pass blocking tackles. And then he also mentioned, yeah, we want to get better. And what does he want to get better on? Smash mouth football and running the damn ball. Kurt, run the dang ball. That's what the Texans want to do this year. They want to run the ball better and have more, tough glass eaters up front on the offensive line. And that just wasn't Laremy Tunsil. So I think he's saying, paired with the cap savings down the road, which that's not the main reason the Texans traded him. That wasn't the only reason. If the Texans really, really wanted to keep Laremy Tunsil around, money-wise, they could have done that. But I think that paired with the fact that they want this, scheme change along the offensive front, and they got a nice little haul of picks where maybe a year or two down the road they wouldn't have gotten the same draft haul, even though I will stand on I think they possibly could have gotten more in a draft trade. Possibly they didn't want to trade with somebody in the AFC in their own conference. That's just my theory, that they might have had a better offer, but maybe it was a team like Tennessee. Maybe it was a team, maybe not in your division, but in the same conference, and they're like, no, we don't want to make that team any better. Maybe the Chiefs came calling, and they were like, no, we'd rather trade him to the Commanders and not see him, once a year. So that's just my say on it, but I think some of the reasons why they traded Tunsil, you can see from the comments from DeMeco in that they want to be a more run-heavy team this upcoming season. And talking about the run game, He talked about the coaching staff as well. He talked about Nick Caley, but he mainly emphasized Cole Popovich, the new Texans offensive line coach. This is what DeMeco had to say. Having one voice with Cole Popovich. Cole's a good O-line coach, and the thing for me is having an offensive coordinator and an O-line coach in tandem. Cole and Caley have worked together before, and they spent a lot of time together before, so just the flow of information has sped up drastically. The flow of information has sped up drastically. That's the part of that quote that I really wanted to hone in on, because maybe it's me, connecting the dots. Maybe it's me kind of putting words in DeMeco's mouth. But for me, that last line said, before Cole and Caley, there wasn't a great line of communication between the Texans coaching staff. And maybe this is what Albert Breer was more focusing on, not the players per se, but the actual coaching staff, because was the coaching staff toxic? Is that what we were talking about? Because these comments were very telling in that he was saying, yeah, we need one voice. That was one of the other big things from that quote. One voice in Cole Popovich. Does that mean there was multiple voices in the room and kind of one of those things? If you have 5 leaders, you really have none. You don't have one voice in the locker room telling you what you need to do? Or was that more telling on Bobby Slowick in that he didn't know how to delegate as the offensive coordinator? He wasn't a leader in the coaching staff room as he was in the players room, which I think for both of those, you kind of say that's kind of where Bobby Slowick had his downfalls, as he wasn't a really good leader of men. I think these comments were kind of telling by DeMeco as well, on that he wants a fresh start. And we all knew it was hard for him to, kick Slowick off to the curb. Those two were buddies. They were good friends. They came to Houston together. But he saw that it wasn't working out with this Texans offensive coaching staff. Also, maybe some shots at the old O-line coach, Chris Strasser, because we were all a little, I would say Texans fans were a little bit surprised in that they just promoted Cole Popovich with how bad the Texans offensive line played last year. But multiple insiders, multiple reports have been saying that, Cole Popovich didn't really have a say in this Texans offensive line room last year. Might be a little troubling if that, one of your assistants, one of your top guys doesn't really have a say, but we'll see if maybe it was a Strausser-Slowick problem and Caley and Popovich can come in and clean some of the mess up. And lastly, DeMeco commented on the offseason additions for the Texans, and he had a lot of high praise for a lot of these guys. First, he talked about C.J. Gardner-Johnson and just his addition to the secondary. He said he immediately improves the back end of this secondary unit, and he just feels his passion for football. And same with me. He's got me fired up. He used a couple of my clips in his, TikToks, his Instagram reels of coming to Houston, which I'm all for. I was hyped on the move. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson, sounds like everybody's excited for you to play for the Houston Texans this next season. He also talked about Christian Kirk, calling him a friendly target for C.J. Stroud, which I think that's a nice way of saying he's the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, like being like, oh yeah, he's gonna make some nice plays, where I think he wants to temper expectations on Christian Kirk, because I do believe they're going to draft a wide receiver in the first couple rounds, and Christian Kirk will play that kind of mentor role and be the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for this team. He also talked about E.J. Speed, adding him this past weekend, the linebacker formerly of the Indianapolis Colts. He said he was long, fast, and explosive, which, if we know one thing about DeMeco Ryans, if we know one thing around, the moves that he makes on the defensive side, he's a former linebacker. If anything, he's able to evaluate that position and bring in guys who he really likes for this system. I think E.J. Speed, like I said in my video this past week, he's going to compete for that LB3 role. Him and Christian Harris are going to have to fight it out. Even though the Texans mostly go 2 linebacker sets, I think it's going to be an interesting camp battle with E.J. Speed, even maybe pushing Henry To'oTo'o just a little bit. I do think Al Shire is the clear linebacker 1, though. And then he also talked about Shavon Diggs. And, he gave him a lot of praise. Said he's actually one of the toughest competitors he's ever been around. And for DeMeco Ryans, who is a former player as well, to say that about Shavon Diggs is pretty high praise. And he also said the Texans were trying to bring him back. So just a fun little nugget there, in that the Texans were trying to make something work with Shavon Diggs. We knew that the Texans had interest in bringing Diggs back past this season, but it looks like the Texans were just like, you know what? If the Patriots are going to give you 3 years, $69 million, For $26 million guaranteed, yeah, we're good on that. You can go over to New England. You can get that big money over there. We're not going to, price match a team that's top 3 in salary cap this offseason. So ultimately, the money talked, and that's why Stefon Diggs ended up with the New England Patriots. And lastly, and this is just because this is a hot button topic, probably the biggest issue going on at the NFL owners meeting right now, banning the tush push from the Philadelphia Eagles, which surprisingly, the Bills, Sean McDermott, is one of the guys spearheading the NFL to ban this play, even though the Bills were second in the NFL over the past 2 years in usage of the tush push. DeMeco, though, I think he's playing a little bit of the fence here, right? This was his comment on the tush push. With the tush push, it's hard to penalize a team for doing something well. It's also hard to stop. There are a lot of factors. So really not giving his thoughts one way or the other. He's like, oh, yeah, it's hard to, penalize the team. But on the other side, there's this. So I think DeMeco Ryans, for all my reality show lovers out there, I watch Big Brother, I watch Survivor. He's what we call a swing vote. He's one of the guys who's in the middle who's like, I don't know, where can you persuade me on each side? I don't think he has a huge, gripe with it. I don't think he has a huge opinion on it, but it's one of the biggest issues going on at the NFL owners meeting. So I want to know from you folks at home. I know we don't see the Eagles a lot. They're in the NFC, we're in the AFC. But when it comes to the tush push, do you think the NFL should ban it? Go down, give me a yes, give me a no, give me your thoughts on the tush push. Smitty, do you like the tush push? Do you think it should be banned? He's giving me a thumbs up. He says it should be banned. I don't think it should be banned. You should man up and try to stop that play. So we have two differing opinions right there. Let me know down in the comments section your thoughts on the push of the tush. But while you're down there, if you want to maybe push some gear, maybe some nice Texans gear, they have the new Texans draft hat. This one comes with the H-Town made pin. There's also this one right here with the red bill. You can check those out and all the hats that they have available with our friends over at Fanatics. You go to chatsports.com/Texans hats. That link will be in the comment section and description of today's video. Like I said, if you want to get the brand new Texans draft hats, they also have like trucker hats, the salute to service. They have all the new, Texans secondary logo hats, all available now. Go check them out. One more time, it's chatsports.com/Texans hats. I don't know how I feel about the new draft hats. I think they're okay. I think the pin makes it better. If I was to get one, I would definitely get the one with the H-Town made pin. You can go check them out today in that link in the comments section. Now, let's talk about some Texans draft visits where this actually came in over the weekend. Nick Scourton, defensive lineman from the A&M Aggies, he's scheduled for a visit with the Houston Texans. And I'm still trying to parse out whether this is a top 30 visit or if this is a local visit. I looked it up today, and local visits are in the metropolitan area or if somebody grew up in that area. So I'm still a little confused on the logistics of that. But either way, Nick Scourton, a good defensive lineman, a round 2, round 3 guy, in my opinion, had a pretty good season this past year for Texas A&M. And I think with this, and then they also met with Joshua Farmer from Florida State, it's kind of showing you, revealing some of the Texans draft plans, right? They've been looking at a lot of offensive tackles who are on day 2. They've also been looking at a lot of defensive linemen. So I could see them going D-line in day 2 of the NFL draft this year with a guy like Joshua Farmer, who I've actually mocked to the Texans quite a few times there in round 2, round 3. Looks like a popular option for the Texans, and they want to add some beef up front on the O-line and the D-line, but I think it's pretty clear in round 1, the guys that they're looking at are wide receiver and offensive line in round 1. A lot of day 2 guys, though, on defense and at some other positions like offensive tackle, where they met with also Chase Lunt from UConn, 13 games played this past year, 86.2 PFF grade. Another guy who is a fringe day 2, probably more of a day 3 guy, round 4, 5, or 6. But the Texans doing their due diligence on tackles, and they might even double dip at the position during this year's draft with another pick in like round 5, if you ask me. Also, Upton Stout, who is a Houston native. I believe he went to North Shore. He also is scheduled to meet with the Texans. An undersized guy, 5'8", 5'8.5", 180 pounds. Pretty good career at Western Kentucky, even though he started off at my alma mater, Smitty. He started off at the University of North Texas, Upton Stout did. kind of reminds me of like a Jalen Petrie light, I guess, a little bit. He's a good hitter for his size, pretty good in coverage, but obviously undersized. Also, they met with Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA, an edge rusher, 57 tackles. Thank you for that, Smitty. 4.5 sacks this past year. Another, day 2, day 3 edge rusher. And like I said, I need to get better on the exact top 30 visits versus local visits. I'm trying to keep it up with you. I'm going to also reach out to a couple of my guys and kind of double check my list and have that later on in the week for you with the official top 30 visits versus local versus just guys who they're meeting up with at their pro days. But I also talked about these 8 guys who have met with the Texans as well. A couple of running backs, a couple of wide receivers, a couple of defensive guys, and then a couple of offensive tackles. So obviously the Texans doing their due diligence before the NFL draft. You want to stay up to date with everything going on around the Houston Texans? Hey, I got you covered. You can give me a follow on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs. And as always, hit that subscribe button. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. What's to lose? It's 100% free. This is your one-stop shop for Texans news and rumors. So if you like that, if you like free content, I promise you, give me 1 week. Hit that subscribe button. If you don't like it in a week, you can unsubscribe. But let me prove to you why this is the #1 Texans channel here on YouTube.